The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Scott Pilgrim in its whole is a series about characters who keep repeating the same mistake over and over again and not learning from their mistakes. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is a Netflix animated series created by the minds of Brian Lee O'Malley and aided by Ben David Grabinski, coming from the animation studio of Science Saru.
Scott Pilgrim.
For those who did not know, Scott Pilgrim started off as a comic book from Brian Lee O'Malley in the early 2000s. Then, in 2010, Edgar Wright took the comic and made a feature-length film out of it, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which was my personal entry into the series.
Mr. Pilgrim! I'm Ramona's first evil ex-boyfriend.
What? Wait, we're fighting over Ramona?
Didn't you get my email explaining the situation?
I skimmed it.
And without a doubt, my favorite film of all time. Me and a friend would do a yearly watching of this movie, and without fail, we would laugh at the same jokes and gags year after year without fail. If it can bring the same emotion to you each time without getting stale, you know you have something special. Also, the soundtrack for this film was masterfully constructed. I remember downloading Clash at Demon Head's Black Sheep on my MP3 player so I can hear the song on repeat while in high school.
That guy on bass?
Oh, yeah?
That's Todd.
I know! Oh, yeah?
You know?
Oh,
Oh no.
Though it took me many years, I finally got around to reading the comics, which only deepened my connection to the characters of Scott Pilgrim. But I learned something while reading the comic. These characters that I love seeing so much on screen were slightly different in the comic. They had a sense to them that no other comic or manga had ever given me before, and I wasn't sure what it was. More on that later, but for now, let's talk about Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. The show follows the movie/comic more or less. I was expecting an adaptation of the comic and excited to see some of the cool fight scenes I've never seen on screen take place, and also disappointed with some of the voice acting. Something felt off. When I switched from the American dub to the Japanese dub, the animation seemed to flow way better with the voice acting. I wasn't sure if this was because of my long hours watching subbed anime, that my brain only saw Japanese voice acting as better than English voice acting, but also realization that the Japanese company animated the series, and it made sense that the Japanese voice actors inflected a touch better than the English voice actors. Which, after research, it seemed as though they recorded the voice lines first before the animation. Definitely not a typical process when it comes to dubbing voice lines in animation. Even though I enjoyed the sound of the Japanese actors slightly more than the English voice actors, I needed to watch the series with the English voice actors because I grew up watching the Scott Pilgrim movie so much, and when I read the comic, all the characters already had a voice in my head. So those voices were too iconic for me not to choose them to continue with.
I'm a huge fan.
Tell me something I don't know.
At the end of episode 1, we get the revelation that Scott gets KO'd by Matthew Patel. This concept hooked me as I and every other viewer knew we were going to get something completely different from either the movie or comic.
Is the show over?
There was no show. The bass player was punched to death.
Did you say punched to death?
Those are the words I said.
A small part of me was sad that certain scenes from the comic won't be animated, but a larger part of me was way more excited that the series I love so much that I watched 1,000 times and finally read all the way through was going to give me something new and refreshing to look forward to, and I was very excited. The show takes Ramona on as the main lead. Even in the comic, I believe her to be the true main character. She begins looking for clues to Scott's death and finds out someone actually staged his death and kidnapped him. Believing it to be one of her 7 evil exes, she meets up with them one by one to find out who it was and what they know. And along the way, she realizes something about them that makes them more than just an evil ex. No, these characters take on a whole new perspective and become fully fleshed out characters of their own right. And they are a joy to watch on screen. All happening while young Neil makes a Scott Pilgrim movie, Matthew Patel takes over Gideon's empire, and Wallace Wells steals the show. No surprise there, I love Wallace as a character in every version of this series.
Hey, how was that? Gay enough? Any notes?
Yeah. How about you build a time machine, go back in time, and never audition for this part in the first place?
This show is dripping with style. From the animation, to the characterization of the villains, to the amazing fights we get to see. Only these fights are not like anything we've seen before, with different fighters and new locations. They make lots of movie references in this show, not only to the Scott Pilgrim movie, but to movies in general. They go to the Universal Studio a lot. Edgar Wrong is a character. I love that they did that. And they put the shoelace scene in. There is a stuntman fight between Ramona and Wallace's stuntman, which is a reference to Lucas Lee's stuntman in the movie. In Roxy and Ramona's fight, they go through movie DVDs actually within the world of the movies. And that's just such a cool concept. Like simple, but just an amazing execution. They put Simon Pegg and Nick Frost from Hot Fuzz in the series as well. Even if you're just an Edgar Wright fan, you get a nugget of surprise, and something that doesn't take away from the narrative. If we're talking about Edgar Wright, we can't talk about Edgar Wright without mentioning how amazing the soundtrack is. Done by some extremely talented people, it way exceeded what I thought was already going to be an amazing soundtrack. The track titled United States of Whatever, playing during Lucas Lee's intro episode, and skateboarding scene was just
Whatever.
I can't give enough praise for how well each part of the series was calculated. However, I will give a grain of doubt to anyone who doesn't believe when I say how amazing the series is, because of how much of a fanboy I am when it comes to this series. This is one of the movies that inspired me to become a filmmaker. That saying, if I had to pick something that I disliked about the show, the list would be very small, but it would include some of the English voice acting. Though I love the sound of the characters, I feel a bit more inflection could have been put into the English dub, though I know how the recording schedule went was not typical. Also, there are a few inconsistent moments that turned me into the glasses-wearing kid from Polar Express saying, "Actually," such as the moment when Ramona is showing the tape to everyone about who kidnapped Scott, and that day she just finds the right angle of the robot opening the vegan portal, taking Scott away, where before she had the same tape and it didn't show that angle before. You would believe if she got a tape of the incident, she would look at all the angles. However, I can suspend my disbelief for the whodunit reveal. We learn that Scott was taken not to a place and not by another person, but to another time by himself.
Where are we?
Toronto, Canada.
When are we?
The future.
And you're...
Older Scott. This was such a cool reveal to me, and hearing older Scott talk about what happened in his life confirmed to me that what was happening here in the series is not just an alternate reality, it's a parallel reality. Older Scott is the Scott Pilgrim from the comic. He had his happily ever after and married Ramona, only it wasn't happily ever after. They split up things didn't work out the way they wanted them to, and she left, causing older Scott to once again move in with older Wallace.
My husband is...
Don't!
Well, it's not a secret.
He's not ready. I haven't prepared him.
He's gonna find out one way or another.
All right. I didn't want to do this so soon, but he's right. Somebody needs to tell you. Wallace's husband works at Nintendo.
Where they make the video games?
Yes.
Does he get every game for free?
Yes.
He doesn't.
And make a harebrained scheme to get our Scott to not get together with Ramona, so older Scott's heart won't be broken. Around this time, all the 7 evil exes had made amends with Ramona, and she finally confronted her past. Something which I'm glad they changed in this adaptation, because even more than Scott, the person who is more of the main character in the series is Ramona. In the comic, Scott was the one to confront Ramona's past. In this show, she went to all of her 7 evil exes and actually confronted her past herself, something she never was good at doing. Everyone from the League of Evil Exes became not so evil anymore. They moved on with their life and forgot all about Ramona Flowers and became actual characters in their own right. Scott returns from the future thanks to older Ramona, and when they try to kiss, a force field stops them from kissing. During the finale, all the cast of characters are pulled into a red portal, showing the true big bad of the series.
Scott?
But old.
No.
Even older Scott. He created the AT field, AK field, that's anti-kiss field. Anyways, even older Scott decides it's a great idea to kill his younger self so he won't get with Ramona and begins fighting with everyone. This is really making me think of how men would rather go back in time and defeat their younger selves rather than go to therapy. But this fight was the self-fulfilling prophecy of Scott Pilgrim versus the world. Also a reference to Nega Scott, but in a cooler, way more plot-relevant way. Even older Scott is Nega Scott, and the ideas of Nega Scott embodied uncertainty of the future and doubt. Ramona and Scott say to each other,
Do I want to date that guy? You think I want to become that guy?
but there it is, fate staring you down. Older Ramona comes in and gives even older Scott a piece of her mind, but not before Ramona can give her a piece of her mind. This is still making sense, right? Ramona realizes she was the cause of all of her exes turning evil. She kept running away from the things she loved and caused them to hurt. This is a great moment to show that if lots of bad things are happening around you, you have to look inward to see if you are the constant. Did you have a negative effect on people and push them away or into a painful spot? Hey, it's me, I'm the problem. Ramona realizes this and chose herself. Chose to not run away from what she loved anymore. Even though a relationship hits a hard patch, doesn't mean it's time to head for the hills. You have to stay grounded with yourself and that person and find a solution. Only then will things begin to heal, just like in Sonic. At the core, Scott Pilgrim is a series about learning to be an adult and not running away from your problems. You have to face them head on and try to fix them. The problem of Ramona and Scott were fixed once they faced the thing or person they didn't want to face. Maybe it wasn't happily ever after, and maybe they'll have issues again. But that's reality. Life is not a Disney movie. It has its high roads and its low roads. That's what I love so much about the Scott Pilgrim series. All the characters felt too real, even more than real people. They don't always act nice to each other. The main character does unheroic things. The villains do heroic things. People do mean things, but at the end of the day, they're just complex people who deserve a chance just as much as any other person. Except Edgar Wrong. He just got fired to death. Thank you all so much for watching. I know I'm late to the Scott Pilgrim show, but I wanted to finish reading the comic and have a good understanding of all 3 versions of this amazing story that I love so much, that has inspired me for generations. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and get that subscribe power up and become one of the amazing film fans. I'll see you all next time because we're moving on.